All right, welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening seminar series put on by UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Northwest Campus here in Nome, and also UAF Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome. And you're in the Nome office, the home office, Nome home office tonight. So the Bering Strait region, UAF Alaska Sea Grant and Northwest Campus, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. And tonight, it's a real pleasure. We've got a panel of speakers. You can see they've got this cool camera. They're calling in from Juneau, and they're all over the country. So to get them in one time zone and in one room is really magnificent. And this group of people came to Alaska, and I'll introduce them one by one. They came to Alaska, and not only did they listen, but they're turning around and they're here tonight to tell us what they heard and some of their thoughts. And oftentimes we don't get that kind of follow through. And so we're just really appreciative of all of them tonight. So first off, we've got Kim Damon-Randall. She is the director of the Office of Protected Resources at NOAA Fisheries in the Washington, D.C. area. So she is the head of the NOAA Office of Protected Resources for the nation. So we're really glad she's here. She was here last year when they came, and we'll hear what she learned. Anne-Marie Eich John Bengtson will go second, and he is the director of the NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center Marine Mammal Laboratory that's in Seattle. And he's in charge of sort of all the research on marine mammals that we see going on in the Bering Strait region and just to the south and north. And we also have the third speaker will be Anne-Marie Eich. She is the Assistant Regional Administrator for Protected Resources Division for the state of Alaska. So she's in charge of the whole region of Alaska or the Assistant Regional Administrator, number 2 for Protected Resources. And just to start off, I'm sure they'll have it in their slideshow, but just in case, what is the Office of Protected Resources? For the purposes of the Bering Strait region, oftentimes they are the ones that have management and research duties for all the seals, all the sea lions, and all the whales. So this is not a trivial panel, nor a trivial topic. They came up, and let's hear what they learned from everybody as they traveled out into the outer reaches of Alaska. We're so glad you're all here, and take it away, Kim.
Great, thanks, Gay, for the great introduction. Yes, so I was here 8 months ago and had an incredible trip, which we'll talk about some more, but I'm really excited to be back in Juneau. I wish I had time to get around a little bit more again to various places in Alaska, but unfortunately I have to go back because I have another international trip that I have to do. But we wanted to come while we were here in Alaska all together to come back and chat with you all about the incredible trip that we had last September and some of the things that we heard and some of the things that we've been trying to follow up on since we were here. So we can go on to the next slide. Oh, maybe the next one. So that's us, our pictures. So the reason why we did the trip last September was that 2023 was the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act, and 2022 was the 50th anniversary of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And we were trying to do what we could to really highlight some of the accomplishments that we've had under those two really landmark pieces of legislation, and also talk about some of the challenges and things that we need to be focused on for the next 50 years. So we wanted to get around the country, learn about what's going on, talk to people, find out what their issues and challenges are, and try to work toward a plan for dealing with those things over the next 50 years of these two acts. So as I said, we're going to talk about what we heard on our trip and what we learned. And also we have tried to take some of the things that we heard and follow up on them. So we wanted to just give you an update on where some of those things stand. But before we did that, I wanted to just give a little bit of a refresher on the Endangered Species Act, since that was really the impetus for our trip. So what is the Endangered Species Act? There are really two mandates that guide our work at NOAA Fisheries Office of Protected Resources, and they are the ESA and MMPA. The ESA is really a very powerful legal framework to conserve and recover endangered and threatened species and the ecosystems that they occupy. And it works both here in the US and abroad. We have over 160 species listed under the ESA that NOAA Fisheries has jurisdiction over, and 21 of those are found in the Alaska region. So a pretty good number of species listed under the ESA reside in Alaska. We have millions of acres of critical habitat that have been designated, and because they're designated as critical habitat, federal agencies are required to ensure that any actions that they take aren't going to destroy or adversely modify those areas. So it's important habitat protections for federal agency actions. And a really important fact is that since the ESA was implemented, fewer than 1% of species have actually been lost after they've been protected under the Act. So it is working to prevent extinction of species. So the ESA was passed into law in 1973. It was passed by President Nixon, and it actually was an act that had bipartisan support. And it really emphasizes the importance of both protecting species and protecting the ecosystems that they inhabit. So it has a habitat element to it. I think people recognized at the time that it was passed that you can't protect species without ensuring that the habitat that they occupy is protected. So we have a lot of goals under the ESA, but they are primarily around conserving species that are listed. And there's a lot of things that we do looking at evaluating and authorizing activities that may affect these species. And we really want to make sure that we have resources available for a healthy population. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the major ESA responsibilities that we have. I think that's the next slide. Yeah. And we tried to tie in some specific Alaska examples just to help sort of highlight the ESA responsibilities that we have. So one of the things that we do is we determine whether or not species warrant listing under the Act. And if they do, then we're responsible for designating critical habitat, which I mentioned, and protecting that critical habitat. We work with our co-management partners in Alaska when we receive petitions to list stocks that are important to subsistence, and later when we are in the process, if they've been listed, of designating critical habitat. Another thing that we do under the ESA is we focus on recovering listed species. So this really starts with developing recovery plans. And in those plans, we work to identify and implement actions that we believe are necessary to recover the species to the point where they no longer need the protection of the Act, or they're no longer at risk of extinction. You may be familiar with the Cook Inlet Beluga Recovery Team. That team wrote the recovery plan for Cook Inlet beluga whales with the assistance of local Alaska Native organizations. There will be a bearded seal recovery team and a ringed seal recovery team. And these plans are for the Ice Seal Committee to be an integral part of those recovery teams when they're formed. Another thing that we do is we have under the ESA species recovery grants. And this is where we provide grants to states and tribes to recover species through formal conservation partnerships. And recent grants to tribes here in Alaska include a grant last year between fiscal year 23 and 24 to the native village of Kotzebue, which was awarded about $400,000 for their project to use passive acoustic monitoring to study bearded seals and ringed seals in Kotzebue Sounds. The Alaska region also continues to work with these tribes to really make sure that the applications for this important funding opportunity are completed and submitted, and all of the good things to ensure that the funding can be awarded. So we also do interagency consultations, and this is where we work with federal action agencies. So action agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers, Environmental Protection Agency, Forest Service. If they are undertaking an action that may affect listed species or critical habitat, they have to consult with us on that action and make sure that what they're doing is not going to put the species or their habitats at further risk. And if it is going to put them at risk of not being able to recover or at increased risk of extinction, then they have to implement measures to help reduce that. So we work very closely with them on these consultations. And we continue to work with hunters and the IRA councils to collect information on marine mammal distributions and life cycles that help to determine project effects to listed species. So we have that information when we're doing the consultations. And we also issue ESA take permits for take of ESA listed species by non-federal entities. So that's another responsibility that we have. Okay, next slide, please. So when thinking about the ESA and MMPA, it's really important to keep in mind that the work that we're doing is ongoing, and it can take many, many years to reach recovery and our restoration goals. Many of the species that we're working on are long-lived. A good example of that I think many of you are familiar with are bowhead whales, which recent studies suggest may live 200 years or more. And it took, in many instances, a long time for these species to be at a point where they are at risk of extinction, and it's going to take time to recover them. So it's not something that they get listed on the act and we automatically are able to recover them and get them off the list. It can take decades to see species recover. The ESA is really more important now than probably ever before because it's a critical tool to help these animals and their habitats and the overall well-being of our planet. And there's a lot of things that we're going to be talking about during this presentation that are impacting these species that we need to learn more about and we need to be working to address. So now we're going to turn to the trip that we had in September. This was just an amazing trip. I was really lucky to be able to visit Nome. We went to Savunga, we went to Ukqiavik, and during our visit, we held several public meetings. While we were there, we met with the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee, the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, Alaska Sea Grant, the ICL Committee, Kowarik, the native village of Savunga, North Slope Borough, and our stranding network partners. So we tried to meet with as many people as we could and just really listen to what they had to say and learn from them. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we heard, and Anne-Marie and John are going to go into more detail on these, but we really learned a lot through these conversations. We talked in great depth about co-management for beluga whales, for bowhead whales and ice seals, which include bearded, ribbon, ringed, and spotted seals. We also talked about concerns regarding food safety and security, which are really important issues and really challenging topics to figure out how we're going to move forward and be able to address those. We talked about the importance of ensuring indigenous and traditional knowledge is incorporated into federal research, into the policy and decision-making that we're doing. We talked about concerns over the impacts of marine debris. And we also talked about vessel traffic and impacts to marine mammals and subsistence harvest. So those were all very high level notes of what we talked about. And as I said, we're gonna go into more depth and more in more slides to come. So I am now going to turn it over to John, who is then going to turn it over to Anne-Marie to go into that detail on what we heard when we were there.
Okay, thanks, Kim. I'm going to say a few words about co-management of marine mammals and touching a little bit on what we heard about indigenous knowledge. One of the things that we heard in all of the places that we visited when discussing about co-management had to do with the challenges with the funding. That's a challenge for all of us, of course. And so it wasn't surprising, and it was actually good to hear the perspectives of those with whom we visited. We talked, as Kim said, representatives from the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee, the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Committee, ICL Committee, and I'd say that such co-management funding, just to say a brief word on it, we don't have the solutions, but that's, to remind folks, that's provided annually through a grant process to these Alaska Native Marine Mammal Organizations, or ANOs. And it's a grant process to tribally authorized co-management partners. Those co-management groups operate under a formal agreement with the federal government, and it's been going for several decades now, and it's worked out really well. This past year, we asked some of our co-management partners for feedback on the grant process itself and how the funding priorities for these Marine Mammal Protection Act funds, it's called Section 119 funds, how those priorities are set and how the funds are funding decisions are made. We received some really great information and suggestions from our partners, and we plan to ask for a similar review again this year. I should note that when funding allows, another thing that came up was NIMS can provide compensation for participants' time and expertise, both at our co-management meetings and other collaborations when those needs are requested and approved in the co-management proposals in that funding cycle that I just mentioned. With respect to Indigenous knowledge, NIMS values Indigenous knowledge and seeks opportunities to include it in our planning whenever it's possible. NIMS views Indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge as complementary knowledge systems that can assist NIMS and its co-management partners to properly address issues of mutual concern. There are lots of examples of that. These two ways of knowing are included in co-management discussions among tribal representatives, and we had a chance to experience that on this trip in September, and between those representatives and federal staff whenever it's appropriate. Let's see, next slide. One area where it is appropriate is when we look at some of the research that we're doing. I'm with the Marine Mammal Laboratory, as Kim said, and I was going to comment about the importance of that work and how we try to be in touch and communicating with communities and our co-management partners. With respect to collaboration and communication with communities, Marine Mammal Lab annually develops and distributes to communities and organizations a summary of fieldwork plans for the coming year. On this slide, on the sort of the left panel, you can see the two sides of this document that we prepare. It's provided in the form of a small poster that can be posted in public areas like a community store or areas where the community frequents. That's to inform communities where, when, and for what purpose our marine mammal field teams are planning to conduct field work throughout coastal Alaska in the coming year. And maybe it doesn't quite show in this picture, but the lower left image, that's this kind of opens up, and that shows, of course, Alaska, but all those different polygons and lines and dots, those are areas where our field teams will be out or had been planning to be out this summer and into the autumn. And then the flip side, which shows kind of in that upper left, that's a description of each project that's shown on the map. And that little matrix, it's too small to read, but that shows which months. So if you look at this, and if you don't have copies, we try to send it to wherever we can. If you're not on the mailing list or you want more copies, please contact us at the Marine Mammal Lab at NOAA, and Gay can give you the address. I guess I don't have it on this slide, but that's a useful resource to find out who's coming into your waters, when, and for what purpose. So I note that for you. We also, in addition to that, we also strive to engage with and visit as many communities as possible to provide in-person presentations on upcoming marine mammal research plans and to answer any specific questions that may arise. So we're doing our best to get out either through our poster or to visit you in person to tell you about our plans. That's of course all limited by money, which unfortunately hits us all. NIMBL scientists also provide near real-time updates when they're in the field. This is on online field reports and blogging, and you can reach those by going to the NOAA websites and finding out how to log in and find out what's happening and where those teams are. Okay, through collaborations with co-management groups, NIMS also incorporates indigenous knowledge into the design and timing of marine mammal surveys, especially for abundance and trends. And examples of that include setting up coastline buffers, or like no-go zones for aircraft and research ships. That's to avoid interference with local subsistence harvests. And of course, we've heard and try to act on the comments about how important it is to avoid any of that kind of disturbance. Also setting up aerial survey designs, taking into account of indigenous knowledge reports on patterns of seasonal migration or survey areas for life history events and the timing of that for pinnipeds. Our research efforts have also greatly benefited over the years by including Alaska Native hunters when we can in our field research teams. And this has included work on small boats out in the sea ice, aerial surveys, and large ship surveys. That's been a really important, added important dimension. Okay, next slide. I was just going to make a comment on, as we look forward, an important example, and we talked a little bit about this on our September visit, an example where NIMS is seeking collaboration and help from communities in the Bering Straits area concerns the distribution and abundance of eastern North Pacific right whales. And this was a species that was very abundant, but was tens of thousands were killed in the 1800s and 1900s by whalers. And today it's estimated that less than 50, perhaps as few as 30 of these whales still exist. So every sighting is important, and we need your help, or would appreciate your help, in keeping your eyes peeled. As you're out on the coast or out hunting, if you see a North Pacific right whale, and here are some examples of what to look for, those sightings would be very important. A V-shaped blow, there's a picture of one. And I think, and the dorsal fins are, or the pectoral fins rather, are sort of paddle shaped. They're kind of short and stubby. And there it shows the V-shaped notch tail. And the head, the top of the head has white spots, or called callosities. Some people say that a North Pacific right whale looks like a bowhead whale with white spots on its head. So if you see any sightings like that, that would be very important for us and be a tremendous help. Slow down, take photos if you can from a safe distance, and report that to the address shown there at the bottom, or just contact somebody with NOAA or GAY or with the Marine Mammal Laboratory, and we would really appreciate hearing from you. I think this is where I hand off to you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, John. So back to the things we heard. So during our visit in September 2023, we heard concerns about harmful algal blooms, high pathogenic avian influenza, marine debris, changes in shipping, and both commercial and subsistence fishing. So we heard lots of things that were related to food safety and food security. I know that Gay is probably focused on these in past Straight Science seminars, but I just want to talk a little bit more about what we heard directly from folks in the region. So with respect to infectious diseases, we got lots of questions about high pathogenic avian influenza and the possible effects on marine mammals. With respect to harmful algal blooms, we heard concerns about saxitoxin in marine mammals, and then also concerns that the periodic research that projects that are in the area are typically offshore, and they're seasonal, they're transitory, and or constrained by the maritime boundaries. And what we heard that is really needed is more nearshore continuous monitoring and surveillance with local capacity and rapid results. With respect to human health concerns, we wanted to look at the time when we were there, we were getting a lot of questions about human health and what could NOAA do regarding human health. And that a lot of the concerns and things that we're able to do that's within our jurisdiction is focused on the marine mammal health itself and not necessarily the human health. But I should want to say that after our trip, we went and we figured out who the right people were. So, and I'm sure if I misstep that Gay will help out. But for human health, we found that the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides medical support to communities and maintains the LEO network, the Local Environment Observer Network. We also found the Alaska Department of Public Health provides medical support to all the communities and manages the Alaska Public Health Alert Network. The state veterinarian for Alaska is Dr. Sarah Coburn with the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation's Division of Environmental Health. And then in terms of samples, so you can, if you have a sample that you want to have tested for avian influenza, that can be tested in the Alaska State Virology Laboratory in Fairbanks. And subsistence marine mammals of concern can be reported to ADF&G, which would be Dr. Beckman, who's a wildlife veterinarian. And then for subsistence, polar bear and walrus, that can be reported to the Fish and Wildlife Service and the U.S. Geological Services. Next slide. So again, our role as NOAA Fisheries in our role in marine mammal health relates to stranding and entanglement response in determining what are called unusual mortality events, and then also health surveillance of marine mammals through live animal research, subsistence reports, and response activities. So we work with our Alaska Stranding Network partners like Gay in Nome and community members to collect information and photos on live and dead stranded marine mammals. The reports are often the first indication of changes in marine mammal populations. So samples that are collected can reveal the cause of death and allow for disease surveillance for all the different types of things we've discussed, the highly pathogenic avian influenza, the contaminants, in addition, biotoxins, and also harmful algal blooms or HABs. So we also are able to look for evidence of vessel strikes and entanglements. And one example is the fin whale picture here at the top. So that was a whale that stranded in Utqiagvik in November of 2022. And the exam by the North Slope Borough veterinarian found evidence of a possible vessel strike. So evaluating human interactions is especially important, especially given the environmental changes and the shifts in human activity. And so for health surveillance, subsistence harvested animals can be an opportunity to collect the best quality samples for testing for these diseases and harmful algal blooms. We've necropsied and sampled harvested animals that were of concern to hunters. And to date, all the samples collected from marine mammals in Alaska have been negative for high pathogenic avian influenza, including samples from subsistence hunted northern fur seals on St. Paul in 2023. Next slide. Thanks, Damon. So there are only 3 Alaska Marine Mammal Stranding Agreement partners big P, in all of northern and western Alaska. We have many volunteers. We at NOAA rely on our community members to report dead marine mammals and live animals that look odd or are behaving differently. In 2011, Alaska hunters first noticed the lethargic seals with abnormal molts, and these reports alerted others in Alaska and the Arctic, which led to the 2011 Alaska pinniped unusual mortality event, or UME, for the ice seals and walrus. So we want to make sure that we are saying thank you for reporting stranded marine mammals to your local stranding network partners. So we have in the Bering Strait region, we've got Gay, her number is listed, and Chuck with Queric, his number is listed. We also have a NOAA stranding hotline, which is a 877 number at the bottom there. And so hopefully this slide can help provide important information for how to report a stranded marine mammal, and that additionally, if you are reporting, one thing that's really helpful is if you can provide photos. So just as much as information as you can provide, and then photos also help us with identification and other such things later when we are going back and trying to take a look. All right, next slide, Katie. Thank you. All right, so next thing, vessel traffic. So we heard concerns about the increased amount of traffic in all forms of vessels. So cruise ships, fishing vessels, military exercises, icebreakers, and then scientific vessels. And so we are interested in working together to evaluate the potential impacts and conflicts with hunters. I will note that the Alaska Ocean Observing System is working with the Alaska Marine Exchange and Queric and others on Arctic Watch, which is a way for Eastern Bering Sea communities to observe traffic in their area and to send those vessels weather and safety information to provide areas to avoid for subsistence activities. And so just see if there's anything else I'm missing on this one. So I just want to make sure that, just to point out that that trip was not the only time we heard concerns about vessel traffic and vessels being in areas where that they hadn't been in the past, just due to the way the ocean's changing. And so we are taking that seriously and taking a look at it and trying to make sure that everything is that we are aware of what the changes are happening in respect to marine mammals. Okay, next one. Okay, marine debris. So lots of concern with respect to marine debris. In remote areas, it's often really difficult to remove it. In terms of marine debris, my office in the Alaska region works with our colleagues at the National Ocean National Ocean Services Marine Debris Program. This marine debris can sometimes result in entanglements. And so many seals, sea lions, whales are entangled in marine debris, and that can cause injury or death. We work with our stranding network partners to respond to those incidences. Additionally, we continue to partner and participate in beach cleanups and debris removal when possible, including pretty extensive efforts recently in the Pribilof Islands to try to help get some of the marine debris off the islands. All right, next slide. So for awareness, just want to shift gears a little bit. So for awareness, the Alaska region maintains a website that lists funding opportunities through NOAA. There are lots of links. If you go to that web page and then scroll down, there are lots of links to fund new and old programs. There are also annual opportunities and one-time events. Some of the examples of the different types of funding opportunities you can find on this page include Alaska Fisheries Disaster Relief, Alaska Indigenous Engagement Program grants, Alaska Native Organization Co-Management Funding Program, the Section 119 that John mentioned earlier, and NOAA Species Recovery Grants to tribes. So I encourage you to check that one out. And then the next slide is about our NOAA Fisheries Tribal Newsletter. So this started in the Alaska region, regional office for NIMS, National Marine Fisheries Service. And it was originally targeted towards the relation to fisheries actions going through the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. But we've since started adding more information on habitat conservation, marine mammals, tribal grant funding opportunities, internships, and hiring announcements, and more. So if you're interested in receiving this tribal newsletter, please contact Emily Wilson, and her information's there. She's also on the line in case we end up with any questions later. But this newsletter goes out 5 times a year prior to each of the North Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings, which are held in February. Well, sorry, it goes out January, March, May, August, and November, which is the month preceding the North Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings. Okay, next slide. So just a moment on this. This is also one of the initiatives that Emily is working on. So NOAA Fisheries released our national strategy on equity and environmental justice on May 22nd, 2023. The purpose of this national strategy is to guide NOAA to serve all communities more effectively and equitably. The goal of the strategy is to work within the following 5 core areas. 1, policy and planning. 2, research and monitoring. 3, outreach and engagement. 4, benefits. And 5, inclusive governance. So in order to create an empowering environment, which is the center that drives all activities within NOAA. So efforts are underway to visit local underserved communities to discuss methods to better serve our remote communities, and also to capture ways to address these issues within the implementation plan. So we had trips that were scheduled that happened already to go to Kotzebue April 22nd through 25th. And then there's an upcoming visit to Kodiak on June 3rd through 7th. So feel free to contact either Emily Wilson or Maggie Mooney Seuss. Emily is with the Alaska Regional Office, which is more of the policy side in the Alaska region for NIMS, and then Maggie Mooney Seuss, her email address is Marjorie. She's with the Alaska Fisheries Science Center. So feel free to contact either of them for more information. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kim to take us home.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to summarize all the different things that we've been trying to do, or I've been trying to do since our visit in September. This trip was really kind of hokey to say, but it was really life-changing. I learned so much on this trip that I really didn't know before visiting these communities. And I've tried to take some of the things that I've learned and mention it in meetings that I've had since September. So when I got back, I had a meeting with the Marine Mammal Commission, and we talked specifically about all of the issues that we heard in Alaska and how we could work together on some of them. And we've had subsequent conversations with the Marine Mammal Commission, who we meet with pretty regularly about this. I also was at the UN Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona in April, and we were talking about, the session was on technology and innovation, and we were talking about the need to be innovative in a changing climate. And I mentioned some of the food safety and security issues that I had learned about in Alaska, and the need to have innovative things like test kits and things like that to help address some of those things. So trying to kind of raise it to international audiences too, to see if people have ideas or other things that we could build on from what they've already been doing. I have a meeting coming up. It's the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization, This is an international fishery management organization that works across the North Atlantic on Atlantic salmon. And one of the things we're going to be talking about in our meeting, our annual meeting this year, which is the first week of June, is how to better incorporate Indigenous knowledge into the work that we're doing. And I think the experiences that I had in Alaska are very relevant to that conversation. So I intend to be raising some of the things that I learned in those conversations with the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization. I also met with the director of the Office of Habitat Conservation, so my counterpart for Habitat. Her name's Carrie Robinson, and I talked to her about my trip and about some of the funds that we have available at NOAA Fisheries and whether or not those would be good sources of funding for some of the issues in Alaska. So that includes the Inflation Reduction Act funding that we received and also bipartisan infrastructure law funding. So she's aware of it and keeping an eye out for those opportunities. And I also talked a lot about the trip with the assistant administrator for NOAA Fisheries, Janet Coit, because I wanted her to hear all of the things that we had learned on the trip and just have a broader awareness of them. So I just want to really thank all of the wonderful people that I met and learned so much from. I'm going to continue to try to raise what I've learned from my visit to Alaska wherever I can. And I'm just incredibly grateful to the really kind people that I met during my journey. It really opened my eyes to issues that I had really only read about, that I really didn't understand until I could actually see firsthand and speak to the people that are being affected by the challenges that some of the communities are facing. And it was just an amazing trip. It was beautiful. The people were beautiful. I hope to get back again. Juneau is great. I've been to Juneau several times. I've been to Anchorage, but going to Nome and Ukqiavik and Savunga was just life-changing, as I said. So I want to thank everyone particularly for their gift of time and their hospitality. I think it was an amazing trip and we all learned a lot. So thank you so much. I think that's it for our slides.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Well, thank you all. And there's their contacts. Right now, before you get your questions, you might want to stop the screen share so people can, yeah, I would stop the screen share. That's going to be a big drop on the video with our internet. Okay. So, this is the time during Straight Science when we ask the audience to give a little love for the panel, for the speakers. It's never easy to be a public speaker. It's never easy to be a straight science speaker or any kind of public speaker. And so you guys, we really appreciate it, your time and your kindness too. And the fact that you guys came up and we'd love to have you back. We'd love to have any of NOAA back, honestly. So thank you so much. We do have a caller on. Caller, you've made it all the way through. Do you have any questions? For that, you can either not have a question, or you can unmute, which I think is *6, or we often have trouble with phones getting through, so you can text or call me on my cell phone. And they just texted and said, nope, no question. So well done. Thank you very much, caller. And I have a couple questions. I don't see anything up yet. So for me, I'm hoping that one of the take-home messages was the sort of when you guys came out, you're in Juneau, 1,000 miles away to the south of us, and then you can see that region, Gulf of, totally different water body, totally different everything. And then you come to the Bering Strait region and you can see that we revolve around the hub of Nome. The Northwest Arctic Borough revolves around the hub of Kotzebue, and the North Slope Borough revolves around the, all right. I see that in the chat. And then the North Slope Borough revolves around Utqiagvik. Is that helpful to NOAA to realize that there are these regional hubs that are communicating and have their own communication networks within a borough? Does that help, that viewpoint help NOAA? Did you guys pick up on that at all or have thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Gay. Yeah, we certainly picked up on that. I think you were one of the strong proponents pointing out the hubs. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, it's really great how the different communities are able to, as you've described it, as form these hubs and share information across the different communities, and that's really awesome. And yeah, the amount of information sharing that you have the ability to do between communities, to be the first responders for each other is really amazing. So it's really great that you formed all those connections already.
And I would just add, oh, sorry, Gay.
No, it's just that that's the warp and weave. I had nothing to do with it. It's just the warp and weave of how we live in our own borough on our own part of the coast from a land perspective. And so attacking for all of Western and Northern Alaska, boom, you have 6 communities. You know, that's much easier than trying to eat the whole elephant at once. You know, you can eat it chunk by chunk as far as communications and networking. And so I'm glad you guys came up and got a look at the Bering Strait region hub of Nome, and you went up to the North Slope Borough and you got the viewpoint from the communication, transportation, and for up north, the governmental hub of Utqiagvik.
Yeah, so I was just going to add that I think that, Alaska is huge. And there are some issues that are overlapping across many areas of Alaska and some that aren't. And so I think those hubs are really important because those are the experts on the ground that know about the issues and challenges that are specific to their geographic location. So having it, like you said, kind of in those chunks makes it really useful to us to be able to know who to go to. And we know that those are the experts that we should be going to for that particular area.
No, we're happy to help spread the word and information. All right, in the chat, Mike Wood, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Ooh, it's tough. You're kind of tinny, but go ahead.
Is that better?
Much better.
How about that?
Much
okay. All right, great. Thank you. My name is Mike Wood. I'm on the Alaska Board of Fisheries, and I live on the Susitna River, and I commercial fish in the Northern District of Cook Inlet. And I really appreciate this panel and having the opportunity to listen in on this stuff. Everywhere I've traveled so far, whether it's Kodiak, Cook Inlet, Southeast Alaska, there's a lot of talk about doing like a stock assessment of marine mammals in relation to fish. And it sounds like I might be on the outskirts of this conversation, but whether it's harbor seals, stellar sea lions, otters, there's a lot of marine mammals that are potentially impacting fish, and especially at a time of low abundance for some stocks like king salmon and chums in some place. And I'm just wondering, have the state and the feds is there this idea of a stock assessment of marine mammals where in some places they seem to be in greater abundance than they have been historically? Or is there a way of judging what that abundance even is? Because just my own experience at Cook Inlet up here at the mouth of the Susitna, we now have like harbor seals that are like 500 to an island, fishing on kings, when they're coming in. The belugas are in here, obviously fishing the endangered Cook Inlet beluga. This year, there were stellar sea lions up in the Susitna River fishing on those Hooligan 2, and the belugas weren't there, actually.
Mike,
I just wondered if the feds have any...
Mike, this is good. I'm just trying to get at your question to help the speakers out. So you're calling from Anchorage, and you are kind of out of the Bering Strait region, but we're glad you're here. And so I think your question is, are feds, and don't go away. Because I need you to say, is your question, can the state fish guys and the federal marine mammal guys look at what impact, like, are you meaning something like a stellar sea lion from the Bering Sea? Is it eating king salmon that come from a different place? Is that what you're asking? Genetically, like, can you?
Correct. Yeah. Well, yeah. Is there assessments of what is a healthy population of marine mammals? Like not just the endangered ones.
Oh, no, that's correct. There are stock assessments. These guys can address that, but just to be quick, there are stock assessments for all the marine mammals. And when we're done, I'll put that in the chat, the page for that, where you can go see what are
Thank
the,
you.
yeah. And it even tells you how many can be removed from a population. They're really on that about fishing and marine mammals. But I'm thinking, I thought your question was, could state and fed biologists work together to look at, I don't know if it's possible through like EDA or the genetics of what they eat, is that having an impact? But you're actually asking for stock assessments for marine mammals. I'll throw something in the chat. I appreciate the question very much. And if I have gotten that wrong, just let me know.
No, I think you're you're on it. And I, in the process of trying to learn all this, I don't think I have a totally accurate question yet, but it is something that comes up repeatedly in conversation with people throughout the state.
Well, actually, you're getting I just got a thing on my cell phone here that says, are you asking, are you trying to ask how much the seals are eating from the fish populations? Is that where you're going?
In part, yes, especially in areas that are having a difficult time for fish returning. Like
Okay.
what I see in the Susitna is I see a massive abundance, an overabundance of seals historically now, and a low abundance of king salmon returning. And is there any effort to kind of correlate the balance between those two? Especially when you're starting to hear, whispers of listing, say, kings as endangered. Do the feds in the state, marine mammals, look at other species and figure out what is a good average to have? I'm sorry, my question isn't that accurate, but
I'm going to put something in the chat box and you take a look at that and let me know if that.
okay. Thank
I think I know where you're going. There's a lot of, yeah, if you're a fisherman, if you're a marine mammal harvester, if you're someone trying to do subsistence fishing, if you're a industry fisherman, that's a tough one. But let me throw in that NOAA stock assessment if I can find the page for it. Or maybe.
I really appreciate that. Thanks, Gay.
Yeah, you bet. I think I've got it because NOAA has a good number of web pages, I have to admit. All right, so let's see. I'm going to put it in here. Have a look at this and see if that helps. All right. Here's a question from a caller. Should we or a texter, should we manage seals like we manage wolves and moose harvest? I think because you're Board of Fish, you're probably more state regulatory.
Correct. I am currently on the Board of Fisheries,
Yeah.
but I'm not representing them right now at all or anything. This is just me trying to educate myself. And I've been asking these questions statewide right now. And yes, I am wondering if in some areas, if we're in a job of managing, if we're recognizing the amount of seals, if at some point we get an overpopulation of apex predators on a species that is becoming a stock of concern, like in the Kenai River, in the Susitna River, or I'll just say entire state right now.
Yeah, say the entire state. That might get you some cred here because we're talking to you from the Bering Strait. So
Oh no, I am talking the entire state.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let everyone think on that one.
Thank you.
Okay. We do have a question, and thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And we might circle back around. There's a question from the Metcalfs in Nome. What thoughts do NOAA marine mammal folks have about the trawl research proposed by the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in critical habitat of lots of marine mammals and birds around St. Lawrence Island? Are you guys familiar with this issue?
I didn't know if, I don't want to put her on the spot, but I do know that we have Maggie on the line. I didn't know if she might want to speak to this or if but I'm kind of putting her on the spot in the last minute, so. But I will say, or maybe I'll wait, pause longer.
Maggie Mooney Seuss?
Yeah.
Maggie, if you're on, it's the, on your bar at the bottom, if you're having trouble unmuting, it's the little microphone thing. Look for your toolbox bar, and it should be all the way on the left of your screen, or wherever it is on your, or up at the top if you're on a side view. We cannot.
I guess I'll just say that with respect to, sorry, can you scroll up a little bit so I can see the question?
The question is, what thoughts do NOAA marine mammal folks have about the trawl, and that would be the bottom trawl, I would imagine, the bottom trawl research proposed by Alaska Fisheries Science Center in critical habitat for lots of marine mammals and birds around St. Lawrence Island? And that's, yeah, if you want.
Yeah, so I think that referring to the Northern Bering Sea effects of trawling study, the NETS survey, is that?
Oh, Maggie is not on the call, just so you know.
Okay. Okay. So with that one, I'll just say that the part that the regional office plays in that is that we do Section 7 consult, or we consult on the effects of the different of the surveys that are conducted by our science center. And I also just point out that so NOAA Fisheries, our trust species, our marine mammals, and then you also I think, yeah, it also mentions birds. And so for the threatened and endangered seabirds around St. Lawrence, that would be the trust species of the Fish and Wildlife Service. So they would be talking with Fish and Wildlife Service to determine the effects there.
And also walrus and polar bear would be U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service too.
Right, sorry, yes.
Are they talking? Do you know? Or maybe you guys don't cross pollinate, but
that's where, yeah, sorry. Maggie's one of our communications folks for the Alaska Fisheries Science Center. She has a really good holistic view of the, you know, all the different activities that are going on center-wide, and that's why I was wondering if she was still on, but that's fine. Sorry for, that's outside of our wheelhouse.
Okay. Well, we hope that Alaska Fisheries Science Center are cross-pollinating and talking with the biologists for Fish and Wildlife Service, seabirds, polar bear, and walruses about this issue.
Yep.
Thanks, Sue. More. All right. All right. I also, for the right whale, it was interesting to see a slide on the right whale. We did have a Straight Science recently about that. And know that around here, right whales are locally called barnacled bowheads. People here are very, not in Nome so much very familiar with right whales, but in the Bering Strait, as we get more west of Nome, this is an animal that's sometimes denoted. It has its own name in the correct language of the region, correct languages of the region, but in sort of a slang English term, it would be the barnacled bowhead. They look very much like a bowhead, but what is distinguishing is the callosity, the growth on the top of the head. So if that helps. And then we just heard about the IWC, the International Whaling Commission power cruise. So that's coming through, and they are looking at all the large whales. And Jessica Krantz, and I can put her name in the chat, she was the one that's looking for those right whale sightings as well. So she was very much, did a great presentation recently. And she's the one that's also looking for, specifically for those right whale sightings. Thank you from Sue, but no other questions. Holy cow, this is the panel. I could go all night, but so I just wanted to also for the food safety, food security, and sort of impacts on large changes in our ecosystem. We're not just ecosystem in our world. We're having our largest cruise ship coming to Nome this summer. It will be coming in on solstice. It is the Westermark. It's going to be dropping off, I think, up to 1,700 people in Nome, which is about the size of Nome. So there will be doubling our population there. And there's a lot of questions about how this is going to work for Nome and our emergency services, what limited emergency services we're able to provide, what happens if they can't get back to the ship due to whatever reason, or the ship has a problem or whatever it is. So we're grappling as a community on the coast with this larger issue, and we're wondering if we get through this and what's going to happen next. Are we going to get more and more and more of these? This is a rather large undertaking for Nome. There are people looking forward to it. There are people that hope it doesn't happen, but it is going to happen. And there's all different opinions swirling around here. But for the marine mammal side of the house, we're just wondering, will there be at any point sort of more research focused on regional impacts from things like the disease factor that we have going with avian influenza getting closer and closer to our region in marine mammals? We have had avian influenza in land animals and in our seabirds here in the Bering Strait region. And then we're waiting for it to come into marine mammals. We have harmful algal bloom. We are having things really real time, like the military drills. We're having the cruise ship sort of things. Do you think in the future there might be more localized regional research, or not just the big we know the population estimates are very important and give us a big picture, but do you think in the future there might be something more broken up to look at specifically at the health of the animal as a food source? Not as a food source for humans. I should rearrange that differently. I should say that differently. The health of the marine mammal. By default, it will mean the health of us, but the health of the marine mammal at a much more localized regional level. Will there, in the future, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. We have a lot of needs across the country, and we're not a lot of resources. So being able to bring more resources to bear in local communities in Alaska is challenging. I think we are trying to nationally look at the health of marine mammals. We're building health map to help get information out to the public about the health of species across the country. But I think it's really hard to commit to any particular area that the resources are going to increase. It's a really challenging budgetary environment right now. And it doesn't look promising for more resources coming in. It's actually the exact opposite of that. So I think we're more aware of the issues, and we would really like to be able to dedicate more funding, but I'm just not sure that funding's there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we understand about no funding out here. I just hope that since you guys have been here, and it was a terrific visit you had, that when you go to your different worlds, the constituents here are really different in that we're consuming the game, right? We're consuming these wildlife, these animals, and we're interacting with them, and there's on a much more intimate level than watchable wildlife kind of thing. And I think you guys got that. You got that when you came, and I hope you carry that forward, because it's unique, and it is part of the lay of the ocean around here, lay of the land, whatever you want to call it. So we're unique in that way, all of Western and Northern Alaska, as you get further north. So carry that message forward. What happens to the animals has direct implications to the human beings.
Yeah, and we definitely did hear that. As I said earlier in the presentation, I raised that when we were at the UN Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona, and the need to develop things like kits and things that can be used on the ground quickly to test animals. So it's definitely something that we're trying to raise in whatever fora that we can. So we'll keep doing that.
All right. And I'm going to give a shout out for Bering Strait regional peeps. Chuck Manadlik and I, we will be taking any kind of calls, because we are, as you can see, Fish and Wildlife is also sort of, they're in a financial bind, I think. And we are really on our own for monitoring, and we have lots of issues up here. Chuck Monadaluk and I will swab stranded animals, we'll swab your harvested animals and get those tested off for avian influenza. We will take samples of seafood, and this for harmful algal blooms. This would also include Norton Sound Health Corporation's Office of Environmental Health, Emma Pate. We will take seafood, although it means taking it off someone's plate. We get that. There's no money for sampling. So if you have concern, though, we will take seafood. We will take 3 feet of uncleaned intestine from seal and walrus. We don't discriminate on the animal. And if it comes out of the ocean, and we will get those tested for harmful algae through some research efforts and some local monitoring. We will not say no. We will find ways to get things tested if we can. So give Chuck or I a call, or call the NOAA stranding hotline number that they flashed up earlier. And Emma Pate also will also assist in all things that do with HABs. So I didn't put her number up here because I didn't ask her, I didn't have her. So anyway, Emma, if you're watching this, I'm giving you a shout out too. I guess that's it. No other questions. Mike Wood, I see you want me to send information to you regarding what? Or maybe he's already left. No. All right, we will send him information. And I'm glad he called in all the way from Talkeetna. That's pretty interesting for us out here. With that, next week on the 30th of May, we're going to have Irina Trukhanova and Warren Beatty. They will be here in person on the 30th of May at the Northwest Campus main building. Their ship, I'm not quite sure how it's going to get into the Port of Nome yet, because the ice has not given up right in front of Nome, although it's rotting very fast. Their ship is supposed to be here, the Norseman 2, and they will be giving us a straight science and then heading down to the dock and hopping on their ship and taking off to go north to begin the walrus population assessment cruise. So they will be here next week. We'll get the advertising out probably tomorrow, and we will see them next week, unless the ice is going to hold them off. We don't know yet on how they're going to handle that. So with that, we want to thank Kim Damon-Kendall and Anne-Marie Eich and John Bengtson and Caitlin, the silent one who made it go tonight. And we're so glad you came, and thank you so much. And hopefully we can get you back to Straight Science on another time, or even better, if we can get you back up into the Bering Strait region. If you guys want to stay on for a sec, we'll say goodnight to everyone. And we'll see you next week, you guys. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Have a good night.